track of all that.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the September 28th, 2021 special meeting of the New Philadelphia Board of Education. If we would all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mr. France?
Present.
Dr. Fuller?
Here.
Mr. Galantine?
Yes.
Ms. Sleeper?
Present.
Mr. Weaver?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Item 2, approval of the agenda. The motion.
So moved.
A second.
I'll second that.
Call the roll.
Mr. Weaver?
Yes.
Mr. Galantine?
Yes.
Mr. France?
Yes.
Dr. Fuller? Ms. Sleeper?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item 3, public participation. Oh, I'm sorry, Julie. First up is Tiffany Sinso. Did I pronounce your name right? I'm sorry if I did not. Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
This way?
Whichever way you feel more comfortable. If you want to look at the camera, that's fine. If you would like to look at us, you can do that as well. Or go sideways.
Right there's perfect.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I understand the level of fear with this virus on a personal level. My daughter has special needs and an immunodeficiency disorder. She struggles with respiratory viruses every year, and at the start of the shutdown, I was told by immunology that her risk for complications related to COVID would be akin to an 80-year-old woman. So I was terrified. We didn't go anywhere, we didn't do anything. I wiped down grocery surfaces, doorknobs, let mail sit for days, researched masks, wore my fitted N95 and shield to work in healthcare and psych settings. I dutifully bought masks for my kids to wear if we ever went out. Experimental psychology was my favorite class in college, and one of my undergrad experiments was published. I am not an expert by any means, but I started researching studies from around the world and applying what I knew with regards to reliability, validity, sample size, correlation versus causation, etc. I looked for anything and everything that might help us keep her safe. The contradicting and ever-changing guidance from the government agencies was maddening and did not seem to follow the data. It was truly shocking last spring to see a large-scale study that had a huge impact on treatment protocols retracted from a top medical journal. That doesn't happen very often and should have been huge news, but for some reason wasn't. I noticed changes in my internet searches over time as well. Many mass studies that popped up early on suddenly disappeared from Google searches, and what they had in common was their findings on one side of the debate. Therefore, if you are searching only Google at this point, you are not seeing all of the data. In the context of PPE, N95 masks, I believe, are considered respirators. My coworkers and I are issued these. In case we have a TB patient, we have to have a special fit test because they must fit, they cannot leak air, or they are ineffective. I imagine for this proposed mandate, you are referring to standard cloth and surgical masks for kids, not the other, as those would likely not be doable. I've heard many say, well, these masks, the standard ones, can provide an extra layer of protection. But does it if it adds a potential layer of bacteria related to other illnesses that collects on the mask and is ripe for spreading around the environment with increased touches? How many times do you suppose the kids take their mask on and off all day long? How many times do you suppose they touch their mask or face when adjusting it so they can breathe easier, or see through their foggy glasses, or wipe their nose? Do they still cover their mouth with their arm or a tissue when they sneeze, or do they turn their head away, or do they stop doing those things because they have a mask on? At the end of May, the CDC published a notable yet mostly ignored large-scale study of COVID transmissions in American schools. The summary noted that masking then unvaccinated teachers and improving ventilation with more fresh air were associated with a lower incidence of virus in schools. However, distancing, hybrid models, classroom barriers, HEPA filters, and most notably requiring student masking were each found not to have a statistically significant benefit. This information was egregiously left out of the summary, but the fact that a masking requirement failed to show independent benefit in a finding like this was of great interest, and the sample size was 90,000 elementary students in 169 Georgia schools for nearly a month. It is relevant, it should have been included. It was not included in the summary. Well, I appreciate the numbers the superintendent gave us last week on cases. The number of positive cases loses its meaning if you are not converting it to a percentage, allowing for the increase of in-person students this year as compared to last year. And if you consider the government planning to replace PCR tests in December because of limitations in its ability to decipher between various illnesses, plus the rate of false positives that can occur with cycle thresholds above 35, as Dr. Fauci has mentioned, you have to wonder if we would be better served to look at hospitalization and death rates in the community as a whole. As experts such as Dr. Dan Stock have reminded us, no amount of masking or vaccination is going to eradicate a coronavirus because unlike smallpox, it has an animal reservoir. We have to learn to live with it like we have other respiratory viruses. The shape of your immune system is a huge indicator of how well your body does against this virus. Wearing a mask all day, every day has very real consequences for the immune system and for the impact of other illnesses that can be spread more easily with increased touches to the face and to dirty masks. It also has negative consequences on learning development, social, emotional. I believe others have brought those to your attention in the previous meetings. So in the interest of time, I'll skip ahead. Dr. Petty, who was also mentioned, is the leading expert in the nation in industrial hygiene, which is the scientific field associated with exposure, PPE, and warnings. He has testified in over 400 court cases on exposure and PPE as an expert, sorry. OSHA and the CDC both tell the public to wear masks, but admit they are not protective. According to a study from the National Academy of Science Press, most of the COVID-19 particles coming from those infected are aerosols of 0.3 to 0.5 microns. 1 micron is 4,000 times smaller than a human hair. These particles are so small that the amount of time they can remain airborne makes social distancing irrelevant. They can hang from hours to days in some cases before they drop. Dr. Petty's work shows a hierarchy of controls to minimize exposure. PPE is at the very bottom of this and includes respirators like the N95, not the standard mask. Those are considered ineffective. The next least effective are limiting time and exposure areas. The more impactful option and higher up in the hierarchy is engineering controls related to dilution and destruction. For dilution, this includes things like increased fresh air ventilation. And for destruction, there's such things as needlepoint, I don't know if this is possible for our use, but needlepoint ionization technology, the new Calgon iWave, could be added to HVAC intake fans to kill viruses, mold, and bacteria. Many parents the other night had said they would rather donate money to improve the air in their kids' classroom than see them forced to wear masks. So I'm hoping that you might research some of those and consider those options. Bottom line, masks do nothing to stop the spread of aerosols and are harmful to our children on a number of levels. I would rather see no change in the current policy than something that causes more harm than good. Please consider the other options. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I just ask, I know we're not, was it the Calgon iWave? Is that what you said? I apologize. I tried to write down as fast as I could.
I believe it's called the New Wave,
New Wave?
and I believe that information is in an email I sent you earlier today,
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
okay?
Thank you. Marky Kimball?
Okay. I first wanted to quickly thank you for allowing me to speak tonight on behalf of a lot of the parents in our district who support having the freedom to choose to do what's best for their kids. I'm going to summarize everything as quickly as possible. I'm sad this is where we're at again in a topic that we thought after summer without, we would be able to go back to a normal school year. And this which is the year our children deserve. Last year, the masking was made mandatory statewide by Governor DeWine. This year, per Senate Bill 22, we've learned that he has lost the power to do so, and on September 13th, began reaching out to superintendents to mandate masks in the school systems. Are you wondering why only schools, as the rest of the state lives their normal lives mask-free? Essentially, these are our youngest, least likely to contract COVID or die from COVID alone, and are the only ones unable to advocate for themselves. I sent an email to Mrs. Wentworth, as well as the board, with a slideshow YouTube presentation of the slideshow and some facts for a quick summarization of the key parts from an industrial hygienist. Thankfully, there's an entire field dedicated to exposure, masks, and personal protective equipment. Industrial hygienists are professionals who assess and control physical, chemical, biological, and environmental hazards that could cause injury or illness. They advise a wide range of industries, including medical professionals, on tested and certified PPE, including masks. Steve Petty is one of the top industrial hygienist in the country and happens to be here in Ohio. I recently watched his presentation that he gave, in which I said was in the email, and here is what I've learned. First, specifications matter. When discussing mask specifications, we need to understand the filtration basis. Here's a frame of reference that should help. A single human hair is 100 microns. A dust particle is 50. That's the smallest you can see with the human eye. That's almost 500 times larger than the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which is one-tenth of a micron. We've been told to wear masks because they can filter the larger droplets that carry viruses. However, scientific evidence validates that SARS-CoV-2 particles travel mostly as they are tiny aerosol particles, not droplets. So protecting airways from exposure requires respirators, not masks, and the 6 feet rule is effectively meaningless. COVID aerosols cannot be stopped by typical masks used by the public today. Using a mask is generously like using a chain link fence to keep a gnat out of your yard. Our public health authorities know this, and in spite of their guidance. Mr. Petty explains that the OSHA and the CDC tell the public to wear a mask, but in the fine print, they clearly state the mask cannot stop the aerosols. Second, these viral aerosols can remain suspended in a room's air for several days, even as long as 50 days. That is actually good news, because that means that we've all been exposed this whole time to such viral aerosols. This also explains why, despite people wearing masks all last year, we still have cases. Third, the data used to justify masking recommendations is flawed. When you look at their studies, they seal the mask around the test mannequin's face, which is not realistic and cannot provide valid data that can be applied to real life. We can't seal our faces. They have gaps around the sides and around the nose. We also know the mask can cause harm. I emailed the video demonstration of a child wearing a mask using an OSHA certified CO2 detector. They were able to detect the CO2 levels rose to toxic levels, according to the OSHA's own standards, within minutes. Wearing a mask can cause a whole lot of adverse reactions as well, including physical and psychological issues. What I loved about Mr. Petty's presentation is that he offered alternative solutions. Other schools like Oakstone Academy in Westerville, Ohio, has implemented his suggestions. They've been mask-free and have implemented HVAC engineering controls since August 2020, and they have been doing extremely well. You all have stated that you're listening to the professionals, CDC and health departments. This is a professional too, and one of the fields of masks who we should all be looking into for information. If you feel as if a mask works, you should be able to choose to wear a mask. If they work, then you're essentially protecting you. The country we live in gives us the freedom to choose what's best for us and our families, and as we should be able to. Please consider allowing parents to continue to choose to do what's best for their children instead of forcing masks upon us. All of last year's heroes in the medical field are becoming this year's unemployed. They are professional in the medical field that you are all looking to for answers. Doesn't that make you think there's something that's not adding up? Again, thank you, and I can provide all the information to whoever's interested.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Kimball, I can't read your first name. Don?
Hello, good evening. Good evening, everybody. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Dan Kimball, and my wife wanted me to add to some of the things that she was saying, as do I, with the time restraints. It's kind of hard to get everything in, so I'm continuing off with what she started on. I want to start by saying what's happening right now is unreal. It's not just a mask. It's not just 2 weeks. And these children are not resilient. These covers on their faces are here to stay if we don't stand up and protect them. As 100,000 people plus gather for football games on the weekends and elite red carpet events take place unmasked regardless of vaccination status, with no social distancing, it is clear that these masks are a symbol of power, control, and the demise of children's innocence and a future rooted in robotic obedience. And kids and kids are quietly living in an expressionless existence. As adults, we can handle ourselves. Children are at our mercy and the mercy of their authority figures. This all goes back to the children. They need us to protect their purity, to prevent their innocence from being taken from them. And we need to do this regardless of politics, media, funding, and the endless pressure to follow guidelines from people who do not care about you, they do not care about me, and they certainly don't care about our children. The numbers speak for themselves. According to the CDC in the United States, in the last 18 months, March 2020 to August 2021, a total of 49,725 children ages 0 to 17 have died from all causes. The COVID deaths in children were 335. So that is 0.00673% of all deaths. None of those deaths were in healthy children. Sadly, the children who passed away had other comorbidities. The top three in general have been obesity, anxiety and depression, and vitamin deficiencies such as vitamin D and C that have been linked to COVID deaths. To break it down to a more local figure for Tuscarawas County, according to the Ohio Department of Education website, there are from January 1, 20, before COVID, until 9/28/21, for ages 0 to 19, 1,582 cases, 20 hospitalizations, and 0 deaths. There are 2,735 kids in the New Philadelphia School District alone, with the average family having 2 kids. That could be realistically 10 families who had kids that were hospitalized in the whole district. Also, in accordance with the Ohio Department of Education's website, from the same time period, the total residents in Tuscarawas County average was 93,000. Cases were 11,297. Hospitalizations were 805, and deaths were 271. How can we justify masking our kids with numbers like that? That's 100% survivability rate in our children and 99.71 survival rate overall in our county. You all know this virus is not going away. Not with masks, not with the vaccine, not with the second vaccine, and no matter how many boosters they continue recommending. Just like the flu, it's always going to be here. It's going to continue to mutate into strands, varying strands, and at the end of the day, natural immunity will always win. You constantly state that you are doing what's in the best interest of our kids. But that is an unfair statement because they are our kids and it's our responsibility to do what's best for them as parents. And that's how it should be left. God chose me to be their parent, and I'm trusting you to build a school program that's safe and effective for learning purposes. My children are not going to be a science experiment to make you all feel better. Please continue to leave the decision to mask the children up to the parents. If you attend the drop-offs and pickup lines, it's obvious how few choose to actually wear masks and mask their kids. And if you ask most of those parents, they're doing it because of the quarantine orders. They don't want their kids at home. So I implore you to leave it up to the parents. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Stephen Hutchinson.
First thing I want to say is I want to thank all the parents that already spoke. Took a lot of courage, and you guys are on the side of the science, actually. I just want to ask the members of the board, have any of you seen the new study that came out a few weeks ago out of Bangladesh about masking? Has anybody read up on that study yet or anything? No? I'm getting staring. No? Okay.
I've read everything that's been sent to me. I don't believe I've seen that.
Well, it's out of Bangladesh.
If
It's
you wanna share with us, that'd be
360,000
great.
people out of 600 different villages. All right? It's the most comprehensive study that they have to date. Your mainstream media is even passing it around here. Now, in this study, what they found is masks will work a little bit within the community, but you have to wear a certain type of mask, okay? Your cloth mask isn't gonna do it. Nothing. Surgical masks help out a little bit, but your N95 mask is what they say helps out a little bit more than anything. So I don't understand how we're gonna put masks on these kids. We're gonna let them put on a t-shirt over their little thing. We're gonna have them wear this thing that looks like underwear. You know what I mean? If New Philly is really serious about masks and really cares about science, you guys out of your pockets or whoever's pockets will pay for N95 masks to really protect these kids if you really care about the science and it's not a game of politics like we all believe it is. That's all I gotta say. Thank you.
Thank you.
And please read the study, guys.
Second.
Any discussion?
What's the plan?
Okay. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, what's the criteria? Is there a certain criteria that you feel like we've hit to make this kind of decision? How are we going to evaluate it moving forward? How periodically we'll be evaluating it moving forward? I'm still kind of curious as to if someone's adult or student been vaccinated, if that is not, why that wouldn't be an exemption to a masking mandate. And we talked about that a little bit, but then when I got the information and I see we have a exemption form and medical reasons is on the form. I just want us to be prepared and that our administrators are prepared for everything. If a student's physician thinks that because the student's been vaccinated or the student's already had COVID, that it's not necessary to wear a mask and they're willing to document that, is that a medical exemption?
The doctor signs the medical exemption. It's up to their physician to sign the medical exemption.
Okay. And any of the other, I mean, how?
Well, I guess in looking at our numbers, we went from 46 last week to 63 this week. So that is a pretty big jump in numbers of positive students, plus an additional how many in quarantine. So we're at over 10% of our student population that's been impacted by either a positive or a quarantine.
That are out, or is that cumulative or current?
It's cumulative, but our cumulative last week, so some have dropped off. Our cumulative from last week was 46, we're now at 63.
And I guess I understand that. So are we looking at where we are to make this decision? Or are we looking at where we've been to make the decision?
All of it. I mean, I think you have to look at all the data. It can't just be one snapshot. It has to be a cumulative look at where we're at and where we're going. And if our numbers are increasing, we need to.
Well, if we use the cumulative number, it's going to constantly increase.
Sure.
That's never going
But
down.
we were 9 last week and we're at 14 plus this week, right?
And that, I mean, over a period of time, we'll see that if it goes up and down or back. I'm just trying to figure out how we're going to make this decision and how periodically we're going to make this
I
decision.
think it's up for review, and we've discussed that, and we'll review at our next board meeting, which is in 2 weeks, and then continue to review based on what the trends are happening in Tuscarawas County, New Philadelphia, what the health departments are saying, and what their guidance is.
Well, if I understand what Mr. France is saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I have the same wonderings. What will be the statistics that we use? Do we use the number of quarantined kids? Do we use the community numbers that are rising or lowering? A combination of things is, I think would be a wise, but we have to just determine what are the criteria. Is it going to be the number of staff or students that test positive and are out? If we use only one, it would be a weak reasoning. So I'm assuming, and Dave, you can correct me if I'm wrong, what you're suggesting is we need to have specified what are the numbers, the statistics, those words, statistics are we using to make this decision, and what level are we looking at? If it plateaus, we keep the mask. Does it have to lower? I mean, am I correct in what you're saying?
And what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. That's what I'm saying, so
No, Danny, and you're there. You know what? A long time ago, the first conversation I ever had with Dave Moreland was because an administrator came into an IEP meeting and told me I wasn't providing the proper medical care for my child, in conflict with what his physician said. Well, that administrator didn't read what the doctor said. That administrator read what a speech pathologist that issued or conducted a swallow study for my son said. It's what's known as a CYA. I think we all know what that means. It's a statement at the end of a report that protects you because you're not the real person making a decision. Well, Dr. John T. McBride, we had to hire an attorney, and Dr. John came on board with us, Zachary's pulmonologist, and was nice enough to explain to the folks here in the district at the time, not Dave, Dave just heard what I had to say, that he was the physician that was going to make the decisions or make the recommendations to my wife and I, so we could decide what was best for our child. And I take my commitment seriously, Denny. That's a commitment that I made to myself and a lot of folks when I ran for board way back when Dave decided not to, actually, was that I don't think it's right for this school to try to tell a family how to, I appreciate the support, but that's not why I'm saying this. I'm just not comfortable with that. There are people. Okay. Well, and please understand that everyone up here is listening. I think that gets lost a lot, and having differing opinions isn't necessarily not listening. But thank you. So I guess, Denny, I feel strongly that there are people that are employed, whoever is sitting in Amy Acton's office down in Columbus, and that's part of their job to do this. That's not our job to do this. And it's apparently not bad enough for that person, whoever that person is, to say, we need to do this. And I get that there's this 30-day rule that they have now. Well, laws get made all the time, and what happens with laws like that is that someone defies them, and then it goes to court, and somebody will decide whether or not it's legal. I just am really uncomfortable with us. As I said before, we're kind of good at managing people that know how to educate kids. Actually, just two of them, the treasurer and the superintendent. I don't know that any of us are good at managing children outside of our own dining rooms with health stuff. So that, Danny, where I'm coming from, whether I vote for this or not tonight, I feel like there needs to be some structure to what we're doing, so we're not just coming in here and making a decision. I don't know what the factor is going to be. I don't have any idea. Is it a percentage decrease? Is it a number decrease? Is it a cumulative number? That's what I'm uncomfortable with. I hope I'm answering your question, and for the folks that are here tonight answering the question, I'm trying to answer the question the best I can. I don't feel like I'm doing a very good job of it right now. But I guess that's what it boils down. I know that's what it boils down to for me, is that I'm not comfortable making that kind of decision for somebody else. I said I wouldn't do it. I don't want to do it. But if we're headed that direction, then we need to have some structure to what we're doing. And I'm not hearing that. there's,
I guess I'd add to that, Dave. I appreciate your passion and, why you ran for the board and your principle, and I respect that for sure. I think we talked, multiple times, I think through this at the work session related to what kind of things would we talk about? I mean, it's not something that hasn't been talked about and nobody has had conversation about. I think I can appreciate, hey, what specifically is it? And I think where we had landed was that we would continue to assess. Obviously, it's a fluid situation, but there are different data points connected to trends, connected, within the district, within the community, within our local hospital, that the confluence and combination of those factors should help shape decision-making going forward. So if we're looking at what our current cases are, within the district and understanding that, I think we talked about that. I think we talked about a regular connection, whether that's every 2 weeks or some regular frequency with the people within our community.
I've got a tremendous amount of respect for everybody up here that sits on this board and your decision-making process. I just personally would like some targets. If we're going to do this, it'd be nice if there were some targets, if there was some way that someone could devise to evaluate if, and I don't have any idea. I can figure a lot of stuff out, but I can't for the life of me figure out how you're going to decide if the transmission is going on at school or if the transmission is going on at the grocery store.
Sure.
Is it impactful or is it people aren't going out as much? Is it how we can compare? I guess it seems to me that we'd have a better chance of making an accurate assessment of whether or not a masking mandate was effective if everybody else at every other venue when they were outside of their homes was also wearing a mask. I just don't, I'm having a hard time, I guess, wrapping my head around I hear from both sides to follow the science. And to me, the science is numbers, and I can't get enough numbers to, somebody said it tonight, Tiffany Sensel. The problem is all the numbers. Or not the problem, but a big problem is all the numbers. Everybody's got a number, and there's nobody that's consistent with how they come up with their numbers, or.
Yeah.
I realize I'm not trying to convince everybody of anything otherwise. I just want to make it clear that I don't have an issue with people wearing masks. I was the first one that stood up here and not stood up here, but I think it's very terribly important that if we don't have a mask mandate, that the folks who do choose to send their kids to school in a mask, those kids, you know, if David is picking on Chad because he's wearing a mask, then David needs to get taken to the principal's office and taken to task for doing that. That may all come to for naught if, you know, the decision that we make here tonight. I hope we can come up with some more solid criteria to make a decision with. I really hope that you folks who have emailed me, you folks that have showed up to these meetings, you folks that mustered up the courage to speak tonight, contact your lawmakers. Those guys are the guys letting you down. Regardless of why you came and what you feel about masking or not masking, I probably shouldn't get political like this at a school board meeting, but I'm going to do it anyway. Contact your lawmakers with the same enthusiasm that you contacted us, because that's important. If you don't speak up and make your voice heard, you don't get to complain, as far as I'm concerned. So speak up, make your voices heard, and I encourage you all to do that. And not to defy the compassion of the folks here on the board with me this evening at all, but there are folks more qualified than us to be making this kind of decision.
Anyone else have a comment?
Hey, Dave. I did contact our lawmaker, Brett Hillier,
Okay.
and I told him my concerns with this whole situation, and he said it was your guys' responsibility. I don't want to do it.
Well, that's
Well,
the
that's
thing.
exactly what it
It's our responsibility because they handed it off to us. They had the responsibility. And they did not want to sit in a group like, you know, now, and on either side, be it the half here saying mask and half here saying don't mask. They didn't want to take the responsibility. So they handed it off to us.
Well, Denny, I think it's, we're getting political, but
I don't mean.
well, no, but I think an issue we're having here is that with what you're speaking to is that this is not a red or a blue concern.
No.
It's 50-50 on both sides, and nobody wants to make a decision because they want to get reelected. No matter what they decide, they're going to tick off half of their constituents, so they
That's exactly
put a 30-day limit on it. And
Did the lawmakers make House Bill 22?
Yes, they did.
Pull the power from politicians?
Well,
I
what
mean, so you can't say
they
that
did was
that we didn't contact our lawmakers.
what 22, and you guys can correct me on this, what 22 did was they took it away from the governor
And the local.
and the local health
The
department. Decision makers, but then gave it to themselves and said, you know, for instance, if the governor mandates masks for 30 days, it then has to go to the state legislature to approve it. And so what they did was, they took away, but the governor is not gonna do it.
I mean, what they
because-
pulled it from was the House directive that is.
Who should be
pressure
doing it?
on you guys
Wasn't that
to force it on the
FDA
kids.
is
I-
not
There's a lot of people, a lot of other people that aren't here. Kids aren't gonna be out.
22 is different.
I just can't believe you guys are actually gonna vote on something like this. It's a little piece of cloth. You're gonna expect our kids to come in here with this. You guys should be paying for N95 respirator masks if you wanna do this crap to our kids.
We've had the public participation piece, right? I mean, that's part of it, and, I think people have been heard, and, I guess, and I jotted that note down, you're looking at N95s, that's an investment, but I mean, to me, and I'm just gonna share where I'm at, I think, hey, I'm on the board, was elected to the role, and people ought to know why I think what I think. Whether you agree with me or not, I'm at least going to share with you where my head's at and how I've arrived at where I'm at with this situation. And, number one, I would acknowledge that I'm sure every single one of us is tired of dealing with the COVID impact on our lives, myself included. And I think the exhaustion of it doesn't make it go away. I think there were several comments tonight that I appreciate about it being challenging to picture. We're not going to end it. It's going to be around. It's going to mutate. We're going to be dealing with God. I appreciate that. And I agree with that. I think we're all dealing with it in our own spheres, whether that's as parents, as, staff and healthcare professionals. And we have people doing admirable work trying to navigate their way through something that's really, really challenging. And that's people living their everyday lives. That's, what Tiffany shared, that, nothing's more important than the health of your kids and trying to understand, and kudos to you for digging in and trying to understand information. Same with our staff, our healthcare professionals. We have people that are doing admirable work trying to do the best they can. And I think the challenging part, then the disappointing part to me, is how divisive and political and emotional and polarizing this topic has become. That, to me, is a shame. To the extent of people who should be unified turning on each other. And it turns out, in addition to the virus taking loved ones from us and wreaking havoc on us to some degree, maybe all of us haven't been touched by this, but if we haven't, we may be at some point. And, it's not even that, it's that the virus is just eroding the fabric of respect and unity that we have as in our culture. And that is really, really disappointing to me. I sure don't have an answer for that, but that is difficult, and it puts a strain on people and relationships and communities and cultures, and it's a shame. And I think, while we're here tonight, nothing is more of a focal point for some reason than mask in school. That has become one of the focal points of this debate and this topic. The thing I know, I am sure we're all unified in wanting what's best for our kids. There isn't anybody here that would be serving on a school board that doesn't want what's best for kids. There isn't a parent out there that doesn't want what's best for their kids. We all have different filters and different ways that we may think we need to get there, but everybody wants what's best for their kids. I sure believe that, and there may be differing views on how we do that. Doesn't mean one loves kids more than another one. It just means there's differing views on how to do that. You can be assured that I have read and watched everything that has been sent to me on every side of this issue. So people that forwarded things with attachments, I've watched them, I've read them, and I think the rest of the board here has as well. I've asked a bunch of questions to try and understand all the dynamics. We've gotten very thoughtful emails that spell out a lot of information for masking and the urgency to do it. We've received a lot of information on why it shouldn't be done and that it could possibly be harmful. And it's all over the spectrum, realistically. And I guess for me, I've tried to read, understand, get all of the applicable data that's out there. I know it's limitless. I mean, I could spend weeks trying to read every research and everything somebody has written, but I have tried to be thoughtful and to make an informed decision here. And I also will acknowledge that these situations are fluid, and it's sometimes challenging to take you can be sure of from me. I don't have, and I'm not using a political filter. I have one filter here. My filter is to do what's number one on the board, the Ohio School Board Association Code of Ethics. Number one point. Remember that my first and greatest concern must be the educational welfare of all students attending the public schools. That's the primary. And the filter I use since I've been on this board is that filter. And I sure have made decisions I'm sure have been disagreed with. I've made decisions that people don't support. And so be it, that comes along with the territory. But the thing I can assure you, whether you agree with me or not, is that is the filter I'm using. And I am going to be thoughtful when I try and make those decisions. I'm not going to be flippant, and I'm not going to be off the cuff. I'm going to try and be thoughtful and mindful. I'm representing a community, and that's what I was elected to do. And I know the rest of us feel the same way, but that's what we're here to do. So that's that. As far as what I'm considering, one, we have to look at what numbers are and where we currently are with what our current cases are, what our trend is, what the county cases are, where the hospital is. For us to be at a place that we've had 70 active cases in 5 weeks compared to 105 all of last year, that's a number that I am not comfortable with saying that's going to get better by doing nothing else. That's a factor that I'm looking at, understanding where hospital, county cases, the things we've talked about before, numbers is a component, trend is a component. Second, for me, is disruptions to in-person learning. So primarily quarantining, we are following the guidelines that are provided to us for quarantining. We have had, I think as of today, 316, if I have the number right, 316 students that have been quarantined since school started. And realistically, we are at a place from that quarantining standpoint that if we were to have a masking requirement in place, then all those students who are wearing masks and do not show symptoms that would have been identified as close contacts do not have to quarantine. That keeps kids in school, that keeps kids on the playing field, that keeps kids in the band room, that keeps kids experiencing school. Trying to keep kids in person 100% of the time is a goal that I think educationally and academically we ought to be striving for. If we can keep our kids in person 100% of the time, we should be trying to do that. If we can also help them to stay on the playing field in the extracurriculars, we should also be doing that, in my opinion. A well-rounded educational experience gets the academics, it gets the extracurriculars, and it gets everything that school is meant to be. No question our kids have suffered the last couple of years with not being able to do all the things they could do. I'm thankful we were able to get through last year 100% of the time in person. I know not everybody chose to do that, but we did. Our kids participated in activities and they had a good experience. It could have been better had we been beyond all this, but we made the best of it. So that's a point. For me, the amount of time our administration is spending dealing with contact tracing, close contacts, and quarantining is a distraction. That is taking our academic and educational professionals, taking their eye off the ball of optimizing education and putting them on the administrative task of close contact tracing. So there's an area that I think we could help ourselves. Interruptions in the classroom. We have teacher absences, some of which are due to quarantining. We're having challenges finding substitute teachers. We're having classrooms that are being combined to have multiple kids putting 2 classrooms into 1. None of that's conducive to good education. It makes for disruption and distraction, and I think that's a challenge. So, from that standpoint, disruption in the in-person learning. The thing that's pretty clear from the flow chart that the Ohio Department of Health put out is if there's a mask requirement in place and if a child is not showing symptoms and we're wearing a mask, they don't have to quarantine. To me, that is trying to make the best of something that we didn't get to decide on. The Ohio Department of Health decided what those guidelines were. It's up to us to try to make the best of it. So end of the day, the other point that's meaningful to me too is just feedback in making an informed decision. One of the things that we got was we had a survey for staff that we got 274 responses back, of which 57% support a mask requirement. None of those are all in and of themselves the single component why I am supportive of doing something on a temporary basis to help us get through the season that we're in, but all of them in combined is why I'm at where I'm at. And I believe, and I mentioned it just a bit earlier, I don't believe that a masking requirement is in and of itself the complete and total answer. and that it's not something that should be a long-term solution that says we should be deciding this for the rest of the year today. I do believe it's a component of helping it to be an answer, and the other things that came up related to N95s, the things that came up related to ventilation, we should be pursuing those as well. But this is something that we can do and we can do quickly and be responsive. And so that's why I'm at where I'm at. So sorry for the long-winded deal, but I thought people should understand where I'm coming from.
Excellent, thank you. Appreciate it.
Anyone else?
Keeps kids in school, not quarantining healthy kids. Good sleep, good nutrition, exercise, vitamin supplements. Let's talk about those options. Let's encourage parents to use those options. I am 100%, but that's my job as a parent to do that with my kids because that's my choice, because their health is my responsibility. Wear your mask. I have no problem with people who wear masks. I have no problem with people who don't wear masks. That's your personal choice. That's what it should stay as, a personal choice.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else on the board have a comment or a question before we?
I think Chris covered it very well.
Okay.
I do have a question. When we met Wednesday, I guess when I left there, I thought, and I could have been wrong, but that it would, the action tonight would have a stopping point and we would take another action to renew it. And I guess I got the impression from the conversation tonight that the discussion on the 18th is not going to be if we're going to continue it, but rather if we're going to choose to stop it. Because it's just going to go on until we make a decision to stop it. So this isn't a 2-week, and then we have to act again in 2 weeks.
Review, not vote, so I may have misunderstood, but that was what I.
Well, I mean, there's 5 of us up here. It's not
Yeah.
up to you and I as individuals to make that decision. I'm just so we're on the same page, we all understand what we're doing. Is it a review? Or is it going to be, we're going to take action to extend or renew or whatever?
My understanding, I could be wrong, my understanding was review every 4 weeks.
So, I mean, so what's,
It would allow us to discontinue it if things cleared up.
but we can't do that unless it's an agenda item on the, I mean, it's got to be an agenda item
Then
from the beginning to stop it.
we can put on the agenda.
Because
Well, I feel like when we gave Amy the power in August to this plan, this restart plan was fluid and could be tweaked and changed as needed based on what the trends are, what advice we're getting from the local health department, the hospital, things along those lines, that would be amended and changed as needed because it was a fluid plan. So this falls in the line of, this is a fluid plan. This is allowing us to regularly discuss, talk about, and if we feel, I mean, it would be a consistent agenda item to review the health and safety. I think it has been since August, one of the items that we've gotten updates on.
But when we take action to engage this, and it has no endpoint, unless we have a special meeting, you know, we can review it all we want on the 18th. If it's not an agenda item to either extend it or stop it for us to take action on, we can't do anything but talk about it.
I guess we can call another special meeting.
Okay.
What was that?
I said, I guess we can call a special meeting if we feel we need to take action on it.
What is the action plan?
I'm
Sounds
sorry.
like Dave's been asking what the action plan is. We have no, I think South School where my kid goes, there's 1 case. Where, if it's 0 cases south, do all those kids still have to wear masks? I don't mean to butt in, I'm not trying to be rude.
The action plan
I don't get
is,
very many responses from many board members, so it's very tough for a lot of us to, the South has 1 case, I think East maybe have 1. Amy, you've been great, by the way, thank you for responding to emails. We're never gonna be at 0. So what is the plan if you're at 1 case at South or 1 case at East? We're never gonna be at 0. So what's the plan? I mean, there's 5 cases, I think,
to be forever. It's what can we do right now to slow the spread? What can we do until vaccines are available to all children, until, so there's things that are coming on the horizon, but I feel like right now, what can we do? Because like Chris said, doing nothing is not an answer. Sitting back and watching our numbers rise isn't an answer, and we have to look at what we can do quickly and what then we can do in the long run as we continue to implement the safety plan that we implemented in the beginning with hand washing, extra distancing, outdoor as much as possible, ventilation as much as possible. So I mean, I feel like we have a lot of pieces and parts in the original plan. This is an additional component. And for me, it's what can we do to help keep our kids in school, because we know that that's the best thing for them, so.
I guess my question is, I understand we have to look at like overall the county and state. Why aren't we looking at the school cases? We have 7 cases in the whole district, none at South, I will say. Why are we, let's focus within the school district as much as we're focusing within the community. Because we all want to slow community spread. But these are our kids in this school district, and that comes first. My child comes way before anyone in the community. That's just how it is. So I just really think we need to make sure we're focusing also on the school numbers and not getting wrapped up with the data, which we all kind of agree, can be construed different ways to put it, different sides. Make sure we're looking at what's actually happening in our school district before we just go into something.
Yeah, definitely be sure to continue to look at the numbers, so.
So Tuesday morning, if it's a yes vote, not Tuesday morning, Thursday morning, the 30th, kids need to show up with masks.
Correct.
You've got thousands of masks that you're going to get around tomorrow to all of our buildings to make sure that if.
We've already delivered a lot.
Okay.
5,000 to 6,000.
But that's the plan is Thursday morning when school starts.
Sounds like a done deal.
Well, I just would like to know
They N95 masks?
if we vote that there's,
No.
okay,
What's going to happen if we have?
Yep.
They can't mandate something really carry. They are going to, you have to have them, right? That's right. We did that, I've had them from the beginning of the year. Just trying to be mobilized them though now, so it appears as though the decision's already been made. That is not true. From our.
no, well, Chad, we had to have them because
Transportation as well.
the state defines a school bus as public transportation. And there is a mask requirement for public transportation.
That's why we took them.
And that's why we have them on hand. And, when we started going down this path, it seemed prudent because we knew we were going to need them for the school buses anyway. Let's make sure we've got several thousand available so that if you're going to do it, you might as well do it.
I understand that, but if we're mobilizing them around, I guess to me, the truth is
I'm saying if it's a yes vote, Trent's prepared to make sure there's masks in all the buildings that can help the kids that show up with or without them, that need it. If somebody shows up and needs it, could be a food service worker that didn't get the word. There will be something there for them to put on.
I do have a question.
Let me-
Neighbor sort of brought it up on contact tracing. I understand, I'm not quite sure, thankfully none of my kids have been affected yet by any of it. Whenever a COVID case is reported to the school, I'm assuming that comes from a hospital, from someone going in sick or whatever. Where does the contact tracing start? Because the kids have masks on in their classrooms, I understand that. They have them on. They have them off during lunch, and they have them off, we're talking elementary and some middle school students, outside and during recess. You still have a positive COVID case. You still have that child coming into contact with multiple children throughout the day without their mask on, whether it is recess, lunch, outdoor activities. You still have to do contact tracing, correct?
I'll let Amy answer that, but I believe so.
So you mean if there's a masking requirement, we will still have to do?
Mask requirement. You already stated that at lunch, resource, outside activities, the mask will not be needed to be on. If you still have a positive case, you still have to contact trace that case, correct?
You would,
You have to-
outside Outside activities don't count as contacts. They haven't all year long, just contacts within the school building. Yeah, yeah. So we would still have to contact trace contacts within the building and provide those names to the health department, and then they decide what to do.
As far as, because I have 2 students in band, would the mask be required? I don't remember from last year how that was honestly handled, like band, choir, singing activities, stuff like that. So the students wouldn't have the masks on, though, because obviously you can't play an instrument with the mask on, correct? I'm just sort of,
Yeah.
there's still a lot of holes here. And so contact tracing isn't gonna go away, to your point, Mr. Lee. Yes, maybe it'll drop a little,
That's my point, Corey, yeah.
but it is still going to be there.
The quarantining aspect would be
So,
markedly different.
and the masks are not going to travel to outside activities outside of the school itself, correct? So sporting events, it'll be exempt, you know.
Outdoor,
I guess my
on the
point
bus,
is-
it will be on if they ride on the bus. And an indoor, like,
Okay. So, okay. I'm just sort of trying to get, you know, I understand your point on masking in the classroom and everything else, but there's still a whole lot of holes and places that are still gonna have to be covered that the masks aren't gonna do anything. Is sort of what I'm, because there's still a lot of other, I'm sorry,
there will be some,
I
yeah.
was here late, I'm sorry.
Not to repeat myself one more time, but students are not in school 16 hours a day. And whether they mask or not when they're doing whatever you're aware of they're doing, or even, I mean, at home for all I know. I'm still teaching. I mean, as far as I know, I've only been teaching face-to-face here. And I've done so for a year and a half. And in that year and a half, I've had one student test positive, and she was back in class in a week. So just from personal experience and observation, I gotta say that masking works within those confines, but what goes on in the parking lot or on the playing field is beyond my control.
Call the roll. Mr. Weaver?
Yes.
Dr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. France?
No.
Mr. Galantine?
Yes.
Ms. Leeper?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Move to adjourn?
Thanks, Dave.
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
You guys are supplying masks then?
There will be masks available for kids. There will be masks available if you can't procure one, yes.
N95, are those coming anytime soon, Brandon?
We can procure some of those.
Have to look into it.